So hello everyone, and welcome to the 37th episode of Tech Life Skills with Tanmay. My name is Tanmay Bakshi, and before we begin today, there is one thing that I want to say. I want to wish a dear friend of mine, Rohit, my sister's husband, a very happy birthday. Now, you don't know this, Rohit. This should be a surprise. I hope you're tuning into the live stream. But we've ordered you your favorite food, and it'll be arriving at your home very soon. So make sure you do take pictures of your cake because I do want to see it, and I hope you have a great day. Now, getting back to today's episode, today we're doing something actually quite a bit different from what we usually do. You see, my goal of Tech Life Skills is to make technology concepts more accessible to people. And today's guest actually has precisely that goal herself. Now, I want to get her thoughts on, of course, the world of technology, but also, how and why students and entrepreneurs should be tech savvy and what they should do to get started in the first place. Now, she's working on some initiatives that I think are personally really, really interesting. So, for example, she's working with her team on an entire initiative that really aims to redefine the intersection of computer science and art. And they're working with famous celebrities, like, for example, celebrities from Bollywood. So it's some really fascinating stuff, and I'm really excited to introduce our special guest, Melissa Sassi. Now, she is the Chief Penguin for Entrepreneur and Student Experience at IBM. So I also can't wait to figure out how she came up with that title. And so, without any further ado, let's welcome Melissa to the show. Hi, Melissa. How are you?
Hey, how are you, Tanmay? Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. It's great to have you on the show. I'm doing very well. And just to sort of get us started here before we dive into the wonderful work that you're doing, of course, with your team, I do want to start off by just sort of asking you, would you like to maybe introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit more about, what you do and how you got to doing it?
Yeah, sure. So I am IBM Z's chief penguin, which it sounds like I have to explain what the heck a chief penguin does. So before I get into what I do, let me explain where this whole chief penguin thing came about. So I used to work at Microsoft. I spent 5 years as a Microsoftie, and my last role at Microsoft was as an impact investor, where I focused on both the internet and energy access sectors, essentially bringing internet connectivity and electrification to locations around the world without access, and then bringing digital skills to people without. And when I was at Microsoft, I worked with an amazing woman who's still my friend, mostly my mentor, sometimes my mentee, but mostly my mentor. I consider her both a sponsor, friend, and family. Her name is Donna Sakar, and she heads up advocacy for the Power Platform, when it comes to doing really cool things with low code, no code apps. And Donna had this cool title called the Chief Ninja Cat. And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And I worked in a team where it may not have been necessarily as open with calling herself a ninja cat. She worked in engineering, and I worked in technology and corporate responsibility, and I worked with mainly attorneys, some technical folks, but mainly attorneys and public policy folks. So calling yourself the chief ninja cat and walking in and into a meeting with the chairman of the FCC, or, oh, by the way, my dog is here. She
Nice.
says hi. Coming in and into the White House and introducing yourself, that might have been frowned upon in some circles, but I still wanted this title. And then there's another guy who calls himself Thready the T-Rex on Twitter, and I thought, man, there's a T-Rex and a ninja cat, and I got nothing. And I ended up leaving Microsoft for an amazing role at IBM, which I'll talk about in a second. And as I started, I still was thinking about like this animal thing, it's like this fear of missing out, I guess. And I happened to take a trip with IBM to Karachi, Pakistan. And I was in Pakistan, and I met this wonderful woman who's still a good friend and colleague, Jihan Ada. And Jihan has a incubator, an accelerator that's funded by Google. It's called the Nest IO, and her job title is the big bird. And then I was like, man, now we got a bird, we got a cat, and we got a ninja cat, and I still got nothing. And so then I started thinking about, what might my animal title be? And then I thought, with all of the work that IBM does when it comes to open source, and the penguin being, somewhat of a symbol of open source, I thought, oh, I could be a penguin. That's like different and unique in some respects. And so I thought, what could go along with that penguin? So I became the chief penguin, and just for fun, started calling myself the chief penguin in, like email and presentations. And then the UN wrote an article about one of my hackathons, and they called me IBM Z's chief penguin in this UN article, and it was on the homepage of UN News. So I thought, you know what? If the UN can call me IBM Z's chief penguin, then I can too. So I changed it in our corporate directory. For anyone who's an IBMer, they can go into our corporate directory, what we call blue pages, which is where all the people are listed. I know you know this, Tanmay, not everybody else does, but if you look it up, it says chief penguin. So I thought, you know what? There you go. So our leadership team, started introducing me as IBM Z's chief penguin, and so there it is. Now it's real, and now it's a thing.
That is a great story. I mean, I gotta say, I don't know what this says, but the second I saw Chief Penguin, first thing that came to my mind was Linux.
Yeah.
So I was like, okay, that's interesting. Especially
that's exactly right. That's the connotation that I was after, is the tie to open source, and some of the machines that we have called our Linux One machines.
Yes, I was gonna say it's actually perfect, considering that you work with Z machines, and those are the kinds of machines that people think, oh, they're so outdated, they're so old, they're like the last generation of computers, but really
it's so far from the truth when you come and check them out. It's this big myth that we need to figure out how to dispel, and a lot of people in the circle, when it comes to, Z developers, or, systems admin or whatever, kind of know this myth is not reality. But I think there's a lot of things we need to do to demystify the modernization and openness, scalability, and security that's available on Z. So.
Absolutely, right? I mean, as a developer, as a technologist, these are exactly the kinds of things that really fascinate me, right? Being able to see, such incredible machines, right? Where, the CPUs themselves have such high, simply bandwidth that you can get out of them for such, the raw horsepower that you can get from some of these machines, and the kinds of code that you can run on them. The fact that you can run Linux on a mainframe, I find that really fascinating. So
I know. It's really, I think it's stuff that really makes you geek out as a technologist. And definitely. I'm really excited that we were able to get you access to a machine that you can play around with, so that you can see firsthand, what is it like when I do some of my projects or some of my side shimmies or work stuff, on these machines, to see the true power and scalability of them.
Absolutely. That's some really fascinating stuff, and we'll be talking more about that in just a moment. But first, though, I do want to say, I understand how you got that job title, Chief Penguin. It's a really fun story. But I do want to know, though, what kind of work do you do on this team?
Oh, yeah, I forgot to talk about that. Yeah. So I had a student and entrepreneur experience globally within our IBM Z division, and it's a really, really exciting role that I actually feel like I created myself. And I think that a lot of us talk about bringing our purpose and our passion to work, and how do we incorporate that purpose and passion into our job, which, let me tell you, it's a blessing and a curse when you've had a hobby and then all of a sudden your job is your hobby. It sounds like a lot of fun, but it's very daunting, because the things that, once were your side hustle or your side thing, or the thing that took you away from work, when it becomes your work, you realize that, holy smokes, I'm waking up in the morning and I'm going to sleep and I'm thinking about work, even though it's still my hobby. What that means is I work together with early stage entrepreneurs to help them build and scale their businesses. That's the entrepreneur side of my role. I have a startup program that we started out, and it's why I came over to IBM and left my role at Microsoft. Had a good gig at Microsoft, but I had an opportunity to kind of move from being part of the team, which I was part of the founding team of the initiative that we created at Microsoft, to kind of being the team and creating something from scratch. And I think for people who, may not or may have, their ideas around, what is it like to work at IBM? I think there are a lot of also misconceptions. I had some misconceptions before I came, where I thought, wow, I'm working at this really wonderful place, Microsoft, do I want to leave? Microsoft's all the rage, Satya is all the rage. And I saw this really wonderful opportunity to come and create a startup program from scratch. With my own vision. Obviously I've got a ladder up into, the broader, IBM umbrella, but had an opportunity to come and be, a mini CEO of my own business, if you will. And so I thought that was a really wonderful opportunity. When I first came, it was kind of like, hey, we want to bring 15 startups onto our platform. Here's the budget. We'll see you when you have questions. And I'm like, oh gosh, what's a mainframe? No, I'm just kidding. But we ended up creating this program that's all about fintech, health tech, and insurtech. So if you think about one of the strengths of many of IBM, it's all about data protection, privacy, and security. We're essentially a security powerhouse, if you will, especially when you think about, IBM Z. And I thought, with so much focus on data protection, privacy, and security, could there be something interesting that we could do with this? So IBM has a product that's called IBM Cloud HyperProtect Services that's all about, protection of data. You've got your information in secure enclaves, if you will. It's running, in the cloud as a normal cloud offering, but instead of working on a bunch of x86s, for example, you're working directly on a mainframe. And the cool thing about that, it's all open source. So, we're thinking how it works is you're running off of a Linux One machine. And what that means is, and then one of the benefits is you've got, high sense of security, scalability, it's also open. And I think the other piece is your cloud admins at IBM don't have access to your data. So even if we wanted to get access to your data, like it's not possible. So when you think about, again, that data protection, privacy, and security play, really powerful. So last year I incorporated 15 startups into the program, all fintech, health tech, and insurtech, dealing with high levels of sensitive data. So like financial services records, insurance records at the individual level, healthcare records, the kind of things that when we talk about GDPR or HIPAA or some of the other regulatory requirements that exist around the planet, it's saying, all right, we're going to do that and we're going to up you one. And we're going to do better than what the regulatory requirements say that we need to do. So I was really proud to, introduce enterprise grade security, privacy and data protection to the startup community. We give out up to $120,000 in cloud credits. We collaborate with the Startup with IBM team. Basically how that works is they get up to $10,000 a month. And I say up to because the $10,000 doesn't roll over month. So let's say month one, you only consume 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 or whatever is appropriate for, your stack or your level of transactions or whatever you're doing. That remainder doesn't roll over month. But if you're at 10K because you've got a high number of transactions, then you're, taking full advantage of the 120K. They get 1 year of business mentorship. So that's all about how can we help entrepreneurs to build and scale from a business perspective. That's investment readiness. It's mentorship with our advisory board who are seasoned entrepreneurs. We work together with an accelerator called Village Capital. And then we provide 2 years of technical mentorship with my chief technical penguin. So we have a chief penguin and a chief technical penguin. So Aaron Rawls, who came over from Microsoft recently, I don't know if he's the jelly or the peanut butter, but he's the peanut butter to my jelly or the jelly to my peanut butter. I focus more on the business aspects and he focuses more on the technical aspects of bringing them on board into our cloud where they can utilize either use us for either part or all of their workloads. And they've got a real person. So instead of, a CTO and a startup, having an issue, having a problem, they don't necessarily have to go in through, a chat bot or through a random, email address to get a question and wait a period of time. And I'm not saying that I know all the answers or he knows all the answers, but you've got a real person. We help those startups with creating their future state architectures, and then really thinking about how they can incorporate the wider gamut of IBM products and services, whether that's Watson or blockchain or Watson Health or whatever else might make sense when they think about their technical roadmap, introducing them to new things and experts. They've got direct access to one of our distinguished engineers, which is someone with patents and knowledge and experience that many of us would love to tap into for insight on an ongoing basis. They have access to that. We added 30 startups this year, and next year we're adding 55. So for any of you who are thinking about becoming an entrepreneur or are already an entrepreneur, I'll be recruiting, or we'll be recruiting 55 new startups. We'll have 100 by the end of next year. So that's the entrepreneurship angle of my job, if I didn't go on too long, but I think it's important to know about the program. The student aspect then is, instead of putting on your entrepreneur hat, put on your student hat for a second. And that's high school students, university, graduate school, whatever. How do we bring new people into tech? How do we encourage people who are already interested in tech to learn new skills, to help them with their employability, to help them think about becoming entrepreneurs? Because we know not everybody is going to become an entrepreneur, not everybody wants to, but how do we empower students from around the world with the skills that they need to make meaningful use of the internet, but also prepare for the future of work? I don't just focus on how do I shove my products down your throat and get you to, be a fan of IBM, which I love that. And that's my, that's my dream, when it comes to work. But I also bring in a lot of thought leadership with our team. Yesterday, for example, we had a skills summit for some of our badge earners that have completed a set of activities in one of our enterprise computing platforms. And for these badge earners, I'll explain what that means in a bit, but we invited them to this half-day summit where we brought in new, what I call new to Z, meaning people who are new to experiencing IBM Z technology from an employment perspective. So early stage career folks. I think we had like 3 or 4 people on the panel talking about what it's like to work in this technology. What is a day in the life of their job? They had an opportunity to ask questions of these individuals who went through skill building programs relating to enterprise computing and actually got jobs. What is their job actually like? What do they enjoy? What are some of the challenges that they're having during COVID-19? What recommendations do they have for skill building and getting jobs? And then we had an employer panel that brought in people who are actively hiring these roles to talk about what are they looking for? What are the skills that you can go out and get to land these lucrative jobs? Because ultimately, if you look at enterprise computing compared to other IT jobs, secret, they pay more. You can make more money. So that was one of the things we talked about. And then we talked about innovation. We talked about creativity. We did a session on the art of persuasion, collaboration, and adaptability. So it was really this combination of professional development skills, or what some people call soft skills, which I'm not a fan of saying soft skills because they're hard. And also again, that early career and employer panel. So that's just one of the examples of what we do when it comes to tech skill building. I'll talk more about other things that we have cooking, but it's all about future of work, empowering people through access, skills, and utilization of technology.
Wow, that is so much to take in. But I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing all of that, because you're really hitting on an area that I think is really important, and I do want to sort of figure out what it is that motivates you to actually do all of this work. But before I get to that, one thing that I will say, well, really 2 things, is first of all, the reason that I think the work that you're doing is so important is because, I mean, as you mentioned, it's not just, we want to shove IBM products down everyone's throat. No, that's not necessarily it. One of the reasons that as a technologist, I think what you're doing is so important, especially because it's relating to the world of IBM Z, is that within the technical world, I feel like architectural diversity is something that's really important.
Oh,
because,
absolutely. Like when you get married to one specific, product or language or architecture, you're making a lot of big bets, which is, it's okay. I think I'm not saying that people should not specialize. You should, But I think it's very interesting to kind of understand what's available to you and not get caught up in some of the misconceptions or myths out there around, this technology or that technology. And I think sometimes there's a lot of conversations around, the art of the possible, if you will, and I try to demystify some of those myths when it comes to, IBM Z specifically, because there are a lot of myths out there, right or wrong.
Yeah, there really are. And I gotta say, I feel like it's even just generally, I mean, of course, there's this sort of stigma associated with IBM Z, but even just generally within the technical community, there's this sort of hesitance to want to adapt to different computing architectures. It's like, hey, we've had x86 for X amount of years now. Let's just stick with it because we don't want to recompile our software. And I know that in a lot of cases it can be difficult and it might be a little bit of a pain, but it's almost always worth it, in some specific cases or use cases at least. It makes sense to be able to sort of take that effort to do so, especially when a lot of the low-level heavy lifting, like getting Linux and the different compiler stack and everything ported, has already been done for you, right? Like, I mean, imagine if Apple had been married to, I'm even forgetting what it was called, the old Motorola CPU architecture since the beginning of like Mac OS 9 to today with Big Sur. We
Yeah.
wouldn't have the Mac, right? They've
Yeah.
done like 4 processor architectures now, 3 transitions from Motorola to the AIM Alliance to Power stuff, right? And then over to Intel and now over to their own Apple Silicon. If they were married to a single architecture this whole time, we wouldn't have Macs. We
That's
probably
why
wouldn't
I
have
think
Apple.
being creative and thinking about how can you innovate, being
Mhm.
customer centered and incorporating design thinking into what you do is super important. And really talking and knowing what your customers, want. But I'm a big fan of lifelong learning, and I recognize that there are a lot of skills that I frankly don't have, and many of us don't have. And we have to constantly be looking at, what is the future, what could the future look like, and how do I make sure that I'm specialized enough, yet I'm diversified so that I'm really morphing into knowing that I'm going to have to adapt to change, because change is going to happen. And the better I'm able to adapt and predict and, be ready for those things, the more well-rounded I'm going to be. And that's what a lot of what we talked about in yesterday's summit that I mentioned
Mhm.
was encouraging students to really, understand the art of the possible, kind of recognize sometimes that rules are someone else's opinion,
Mhm.
and also recognize that you've got to be a lifelong learner. You have to take on new skills and, sometimes go against the grain or go against the norm. But ultimately, we have to be kind of customer obsessed or, obsessed with what is it that people want to create, to make, to do. And those are some of the things that I try to at least try to empower others or inspire them, to go out and think about and to take action themselves. But I think that one of the other challenges that we have overarchingly is we have a, skills gap when it comes to people with, specific technical skills and or just broad technical skills compared to the masses. And we also have significant challenges when it comes to diversity and inclusion in both the startup ecosystem as well as tech. I know personally, sometimes I'll walk into a room and I'm like, wait a second, there are not a lot of people look like me. And I'm not talking, racially, I'm talking about, gender wise. And I think it's been really nice kind of seeing a lot of the movements that's been happening around bringing better diversity and inclusion in tech. And I've made a lot of moves and made some mistakes myself. So, for example, last year I had minimal diversity in the startup program and really made some concerted investments and effort to think about things differently, talked to a lot of people, read a lot, and now we have 34% of our startup founders have at least one Black founder, which I'm excited about the racial diversity that we now have.
Mhm.
Still more things to be done. And this is only one accelerator out of many that still need to evolve. And then 53% of our startups have at least one female founder. Latinx is like 13, 14%. There's still some other kind of calculations that I need to do in terms of looking at, other diverse populations, whether that is looking at accessibility, you know, geographically, I think we're pretty, we're pretty well, slated on that front. I think there's more than 25 different countries represented in the 45 startups that I have, but I'm looking to kind of replicate what we did this year and continue to drive greater diversity and inclusion, in the program on the startup front. And I have similar goals and objectives on the student front, because I would be remiss if I didn't say that when I look at the majority of the students who participate in our platform, and I don't think this is anything special about, IBM or, other tech companies have the same thing. It leans male. And there is a lot of work that we need to do to bring more diversity and inclusion into our industry as a whole. And it starts really early. You mentioned in the beginning, one of the things that is really exciting about what we're working on, and that's looking at how is computer science taught.
Yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So you hear these scary things like loop, and I don't know if loop sounds scary, but when you think about computer science, it sounds scary for some people. Algorithms. I almost started there, but then algorithms, like, what the heck is that? That sounds really scary. I don't know what that is. Or they think, math, or they think about, a dude in his hoodie, eating cold pizza in the basement in the dark. And I don't know, maybe he's just wearing his underwear in a sorry, I didn't mean to give you that visual, Tanmay, but, there are all these misconceptions around, what is a technical person? What is a programmer? What is a developer? And I've been kind of thinking about how we teach computer science, and even the word computer plus science together sounds scary. It sounds like a lot of math, and it sounds really hard, especially if you're a young girl or a young person who might not be very, you might not think you're good at science. You might not think you're good at math, and think that these two things are incorporated into computer science. And I think we need to do more to teach computer science like a language, like an art. So I've got some fun things coming up, but I'll talk more about that in a second.
I can tell it's a lot of really interesting stuff you're working on. And, I love how we're taking all this into account, right? It's not even just, we're empowering entrepreneurs and we're helping startups. We're taking a look at the people behind them. We're enabling the sort of diversity, not just within, IBM or within your team, but also within the teams that you go ahead and sort of, help out in a way to get started with their technology journeys. And, I feel like it even sort of comes back to, across the whole stack, right? Innovation happens everywhere. Something that happens at a really low level is going to impact everything on top of it. And there's so many analogies you can draw, right? Like we had Viral Shah and Keno Fisher, the CEO and CTO of Julia Computing, on the show, and they were talking about, Julia's compiler infrastructure, and they were showing us live demos and everything. And, you think sometimes, sure, Julia is a great language, but how does that impact a consumer? But then you start to take a look into it, and you start to realize that when developers are empowered with good tools, they're empowered to create better applications for consumers. So even if it hasn't impacted them directly, it has in some way. So whether it is a better CPU architecture, a better compiler, or more diverse organization, it all comes to help humanity at the end of the day, right? That's what this is all about. So I feel like, in so many different senses, that diversity really is key. And things like, for example, even open source technology really enabled that, right? I mean, think about Linux, right? Linux, anybody can contribute to Linux. You could have just learned how to code and you found something you wanted to contribute and you can do that. Or you could be, a really seasoned kernel developer that's worked on the BSD kernels for years and you found a little bug that you think could use fixing, right? So first of all, there's that, but then there's also the fact that when things are open source, the community has that sort of freedom to be able to do sort of whatever they want with it, right? Like one of my favorite examples, this is actually really fun. I forgot exactly when Apple released the Apple Silicon Macs, but when I actually got my hands on one of them, some of my friends, one of the first things they asked me was, how fast can it run Minecraft? And
who cares about anything else as long as I can go and play games, like, does that mean Tanmay, are we going to have a PUBG off? I hope not, because I'm going to lose, man.
I mean, I probably would lose because I've never played PUBG, but
I tried. My partner, he has a stream that he does. He's originally from Iraq, and he has a stream that he does, and I know he does a stream every night at like 6. It's like 6 to 9 or 7 to 9 or something ridiculous like this, and I'm like, really, I'm coming to visit because he lives in Seattle. And I'm like, I'm coming to visit. And every night you got to do the stream. Like, what the heck? And he's like, no, I'm getting people to watch it. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And then he showed me one of the videos. He had 60,000 people watching this PUBG thing.
Really?
Yeah. And I'm like, and not everyone, not every time. Like he showed me somewhere like 20K, somewhere like 60K.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't know like you were like PUBG famous, like what the heck? And he's got all these, people across mostly the Middle East and Africa, North Africa, because they do it in Arabic, and most when they're speaking, it's in Arabic. So not necessarily, accessible for everyone. But I was like, okay, he's got some chops. So I don't have his chops. I tried to play it once, but then I didn't have any skins. And I was like, all like naked out and alone in PUBG. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna let you have your hobby thing, and I'm not gonna jump into your hobby because you don't want your girlfriend hanging out with you fighting in PUBG. Maybe you do, but probably not.
Look, I mean, the some experience you have is probably better than the none that I have. So we'll see about that in the future. But but one thing actually interesting, I'm not sure about the technical stack behind PUBG. But what's interesting is that the Minecraft technical stack, even though technically Minecraft is closed source, its dependencies are open source, right? So like, for example, the lightweight Java game library is open source. So I was like, hey, instead of running Minecraft through Rosetta and emulate or translating it to run on ARM, what if I were to just clone the source code myself, recompile it to run natively, and see what the performance is like? And it was many times faster because it's running natively, right? So when things are open source, I have that freedom to be able to just
So
do
cool.
things and contribute them back, right? So there's so much that you can do with that kind of technology. I think it's really amazing. But actually, I do want to sort of pick up on a point of yours around, sort of diversity within technology, because I think that's really important. And in fact, we are getting a couple of questions about this. Now, Shiva actually did say that you're a really great example of women in technology.
Oh, thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you. Yay. That's what I
and
strive for.
I mean, yeah. Again, that's sort of again your goal, and that's what I think sort of aligns between the
I think
initiatives that
it's
I have.
important for, I just did a recording this morning because I was supposed to be on a mentorship session last week for about, I don't know, 10, 15 organizations around the world that are focused on, digital skill building, bringing more women and girls into technology from a digital skill building perspective. And one of the things that they asked me, and I think I have the question right here, and that's in my other notebook, it was around, what is it that you recommend to bring more, women and girls into technology? And there are a lot of opinions, and we could talk about a lot of things, but I think one aspect is having a role model. So, or having a series of role models, in your community, in your gender, whatever that gender may be, but seeing people who look like you or maybe has a similar background to you, so you're not just walking in the room or into the class and feeling like it doesn't resonate with me. I have a friend of mine who's from Nigeria, and she went into one of her classes, and this is years ago. She went into one of the classes. She wanted to study computer science. She went in, she was the only woman in the room, and she was the only Black person in the room. She thought, is this for me? Do I resonate with the people in the room? And she ended up going in a different direction. She did not study tech after this experience. So I think it's really important for us to not just have, role models and people who, have some of our experiences, but also have some of the same backgrounds as us, someone who we can connect to. And I think the other thing is having access to good mentors. And I'm not saying you need to have an ongoing mentor relationship where you have a structured point of time where you meet every month. I'm a big fan of having micro mentor relationships where you have someone where you can tap on their shoulder, ask them a specific pointed question, get an answer to a specific pointed question. And whenever you need another answer, going back to that person, but giving them space and time, where they don't feel like they have this long-term commitment to be there every single month, but being there to answer your questions when you have them, and you being a good mentee by asking good pointed questions versus, super open things that are hard for anyone to direct you on or to direct you about.
I mean, I completely agree with that, right? It's all about being able to relate to the people that are in the field and sort of being able to talk to them and sort of know that you are sort of welcome in that community is definitely a sort of key point of that. And I actually have a whole sort of episode on the whole sort of mentoring and the empathy and technology with my mentor James, which I think is really interesting. So I'll link that in the description as well. But yeah, I mean, Hrishika actually asked the question on the live stream. How do you deal with women in technology being overlooked, and the gender pay gap and these sorts of things? And so, I mean, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that it is one thing that I've noticed at IBM specifically, which has been really exciting for me. I'm very open to working with anyone and everyone, and I'm in a global role, and so I work with a lot of people from a lot of different countries, and who speak a variety of different languages, have a variety of different experiences. My boss is a woman. My boss's boss is a woman. My boss's boss's boss is a woman. And, I think that's a perfect example of, how there are more women in tech in the room in a lot of different companies. Now, when you get up kind of above that, there are two men and then our CEO. So I think that we've got a very diverse and inclusive team where I am right now, but I do recognize that there are certain parts even at IBM where I'll go into a room and I see that it is the majority are men, and you often find that in engineering roles. And so I think that's why it's very important, whether you're at IBM, you're at GCP or Azure, or on any of those teams, or AWS, or wherever you are, whether you're an architect or developer or whatever you do. I think it's important to recognize that sometimes you might be the only woman in the room, and you need to be comfortable in your own skin to not what I would say kind of wait for someone to give you a voice. Create your space. And, I think that sometimes that requires a lot of finesse, but I know that when I'm in a room with a group of men, and this is my personality, I know that I will have a voice because I will make sure that I have a voice. But I know that I'm very outgoing, and I know that I'm very, a very type A personality. So it's hard for me not to have a voice. But I know that not all of us have that blessing and that curse, because it is a curse too, because I am not always as good of a listener as I should be. I want to be talking and collaborating and figuring things out. And sometimes I need to remind myself that, hey, Melissa, it's not your show, and you need to sit back and you need to listen and you need to think about. But I think the other thing I try to do is, if I see, whether it's a male or female, who is not involved in the conversation, I try to bring them in. And I think this is also a role that, male allies can have if they feel like there's only one woman in the room, for example. What can they do to make sure that that individual feels included? And that's the same kind of thing that, anyone should do if they see someone who might be a bit more, reserved, especially when you're talking about, having a hierarchy of people in the room. For me, I feel just as comfortable talking to my GM. I'll tell you a story. I once stepped in front of Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. I stepped in front of him, like literally stepped in front of him, and I did it on purpose. And that's a scary thing to do. As a woman, as a man, as at that time I was working at Microsoft. We did this hackathon. We had this employee hackathon, and frankly, Microsoft still has it. And at that time, there were 4,000 employees participating in this employee hackathon. And I had this idea. It was my first hackathon I'd ever participated in. And I will tell you something. I'm not an engineer. I've written one line of code in my life, and it's hello world. I've copied and pasted some code in a couple places because somebody told me what to do and how to do it, and had a specific tutorial. I could do a mean hour of code from code.org. I've played Scratch. I've played around with microbits. I've played around with MIT App Inventor, but I'm at my core, I'm not a developer, but I understand enough about technology to be able to work in, in highly, technical conversations, but I know when to take a few steps back. At any rate, I had this idea originally that like only developers and architects and highly technical people took part in hackathons. And I had this idea about device giving when I was at Microsoft, and I saw that there were tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of devices being put into the PC recycle, many of them not even having ever, touched a Microsoft network, meaning no trade secrets or, nothing on them in some cases. They could have been demo devices in retail or, devices that were just meant to demo that particular device to a potential customer. Thought, wow, what if we were to put those in the hands of nonprofits and live Microsoft's mission of empowering every person in every organization on the planet to achieve more. So I came up with this team. We grew to about 60 different people from around the world. And Satya was coming to walk around the building, the tent, and there were like 6 tents or so, on the Microsoft campus in Redmond, Washington. And my friend said, Satya's coming down this way. We are going to pitch our project to him. He's not planning to stop at your booth, but you're going to step in front of him. He's going to have cameras in front of him. He's going to have to listen to you, and you're going to do it. What do you mean I'm going to do it? Like, I'm going to get fired. No, you're going to do it. You're going to do it in a nice way. He's going to walk this way. You're not going to know whether he's going to go out this way or turn that way. But I think he's going to turn that way. So you're going to stand on the corner of the table. And when he walks this way, you're going to stop. You're going to hand him a flyer, say, Satya, can I tell you about my hackathon project?
That is, wow.
And so I did it, and my heart was beating, and they're like, you have 30 seconds, and he won't tell you no because he's going to have cameras on him, and people are going to be watching him, and he's going to feel like a jerk if he says no. Like, he won't say no, but you got to be fast. So, okay, fine. So I got my 30-second pitch down, and I did it. And I'm not saying that particular, event led to them rolling out a worldwide device giving program worldwide, but my program did. My hackathon project did. We ended up winning first place in the on-campus event for the whole hackathon as for our center the first day, and then out of 4,000 teams in more than 150 countries, we won first place in the Inspired Me category worldwide.
Really? Wow. That is,
yeah.
No, I mean, that is so fascinating to hear, right? These are the initiative that you take, really, when you're passionate about doing something, I think is incredible. And the sort of, the sort of freedom that you felt to be able to do that, right? To be able to just sort of, step in front of Satya and sort of pitch him the idea. It really is inspiring, I'm sure, for a lot of different people on the.
If you look at my Twitter handle, and I know some of my IBMers are like, "Come on, you need a new Twitter handle. You need a new Twitter." Or sorry, not my handle. If you look at my what do you call it? My
Twitter banner.
The banner, that's the word I was looking for, banner. So that landscape thing that goes, on your Twitter page. So by the way, I'm at Mentor Africa with a K, and it's that moment that somebody took a picture of that very moment when I stepped in front of Satya. So it's me pitching to Satya and Satya listening to me. And he didn't fire me, which was good. And everyone was like, "Oh my gosh, you did it!" And I'm like, "I did it!" My heart was beating. I think my heart was beating for a long time. I actually, Panos Panay, who's kind of he's the chief product officer at Microsoft. He texted me and was like, "I heard about your project. I want to come and, see what you're doing." And I went and met with him and his chief scientist, and I escorted them in. We had a lot of really wonderful people. At that time, a person who worked on Chris Caposella's team, who's the chief marketing officer. Chris came over, and the head of diversity and inclusion, the chief diversity and inclusion officer at Salesforce, who was at Microsoft at the time, he was my advisor. And we made a video with him, Tony Profit, who I would consider, an advisor of mine, to this day, who taught me a lot about how do you scope a project? How do you get people excited about it? How do you drive greater diversity and inclusion in tech? How do you get executives excited about what you're working on? And how do you break down some of the barriers and break down some of the noise of being able to own your own personal brand and your own story, and make sure that you have a voice, and make sure that when you do something wonderful, you create something, even if it's not like a monumental game-changing thing in the world, like people know what you're doing, what you stand for, what your superpowers are, so that you make sure that you own your voice, you have your voice. And speaking of that, Tanmay, should we talk about the Ideathon? What do you think?
Oh, I think that would be really interesting. Definitely go right ahead. I'd love to hear more about it.
Okay, cool. So for those of you who are students, I've got a really cool thing for you to participate in. If you're not a student, encourage students to apply to this. It's super, super, super. It is one of my flagship things that I'm working on in my role as Chief Penguin of the student part of Student and Entrepreneur Experience. We have an event that's coming up on the 19th. So that's 6 days from now. It's called the IBM Z for Good Ideathon. You have until the 18th to register. We are going to have a half-day event that's all about digital skill building, community building, personal branding, and storytelling. I'm doing it in collaboration with UNESCO, Code.org, CS for All, Junior Achievement, ISIC, and a whole crew of other organizations. I have to have like a spreadsheet in front of me to list them all. So this half-day event will conclude in enabling students to share their skills forward. We will give them what we call digital skills in a box, so that they can go out and share the skills that they learned in this event forward. And the idea is to bring a more digitally inclusive world. The Ideathon, where does that come into play? At the end of the Ideathon, the submissions will be themed in 3 areas for young people to share their ideas forward. And when I say students, it can be grad school, it can be undergrad, it can be community college, it can be high school, 13 years of age and up. Frankly, I'm a student still. I'll tell you more about my PhD journey in a second. So I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm a student and I work full time. So a student can be described as anyone and everyone as long as you're in school. All right, so essentially ideas will be kind of across 3 themes: gender inclusion as it applies to digital skill building, access to digital skills education, and racial inequality when it comes to digital skill building. Now, I'm not saying that racial inequality can be solved by digital skills alone. There are a lot of other fundamental things that come along with that, but we think that digital skilling is one aspect that could be helpful in our race toward racial equality. Again, not the only thing, but one aspect. And we will choose first place, second place, and third place winners. All 3 places will get 1 year of mentorship from IBM executives and thought leaders. So 1 year, we'll do design thinking workshops, we'll do incubation activities. That's kind of like a startup accelerator, but focused on someone who would be, creating a digital skills movement in their community, in their school, in their country, or the world, and the world, whatever. You share your ideas forward. We're going to create an ebook in partnership with our collaborators, so UNESCO, for example, to publish those ideas and share them with the United Nations and others. We will then have a video challenge where you go out and share your skills forward that you learned at the event. Make a 1-minute video, and you'll have an opportunity to win $1,000 in the How I Shared My Skills Forward campaign from a company called Goodwall, which has an app that's all about social entrepreneurship, opportunities for youth, skill building, all kinds of stuff. The winners will also be invited to come on a global stage with us on the 18th of January when we announce the winners. And then after the 1 year of mentorship, we're going to have a summit, another kind of like, I don't know, event. We haven't come up with the name yet, but after a year to see what happened over the last year, with your mentors, with you, to showcase how you brought about a more digitally skilled community. because we know that digital skills are lacking. We know that many of us have experience. We want to increase your experience and hands-on technical skills. It's also for beginners, because even though you even might see yourself as a seasoned developer, you don't know everything, right? Neither do I, neither does Tanmay. We'll be introducing you to a number of different things in enterprise computing. Even if you think that you got some of these skills, we'll be sharing some new skills with you. If you're 13 and never done things before, you'll learn some things as well. It's really appropriate for a wide variety of skill levels. So I'm gonna just open up, I'm gonna share on the screen so that people can see it. Can I share something on the screen?
You should be able to do that.
That way you can see the link, because you know how it goes sometimes. If I say it, I don't want people to miss it. Z/Ideathon, but I'm going to pull it up on the screen.
Sorry, could you say that link once more? I think that might have been cut off while I was switching.
Yeah, it's ibm.biz/Ideathon. I'm going to show it on my screen now, just for people to see. Oh, can you allow me to share my screen?
Enable screen sharing, don't I?
All right, cool, awesome. Then that way it's easier for people to see. Where did it go? Oh, here it is. Cool. All right, let me know if it's showing up on your side, Tanmay.
Not just yet. It just says that Melissa started screen sharing, but I don't see your screen. There we go. Yep. Okay,
cool. So again, it's all youth-led and youth-run. All of the training activities are going to be led by youth. So for example, when I present, well, I'm not going to. It's going to be a student who's presenting some of the things where I might be an expert in, and I'll be there to support. We'll have a talk by the UN, we'll have a talk by our academic team, and then lots of youth-led talks. So it's for youth, with youth, and by youth. You can register here. I can fit up to 10,000 people in my platform. Wow. So that's my goal, is to bring 10,000 people to this event and really inspire the world to share their skills forward. And register.
That's very nice. I mean,
yeah, register and share it. So,
what's nice is we actually got a couple folks, like for example, Tassin in the live stream chat saying he's already registered and he made a 60-second video talking about his coding story on Google.
Oh, that's awesome. That's good. Yeah, let's see. What time is it? What time is it Central European time?
Like right now?
Yeah, we had a competition that ended at 5 p.m. Central European time.
It's 5:52, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I didn't mention that one. So we have a coding story initiative that gave away another $1,000. This is a separate $1,000. So we just had another competition that ended today. So this is a really exciting opportunity to take part in, and I wonder how many of you are going to register and see me there. Please share this on your social media. If you have a teacher, if you have an educator that you know, if you're in school, help me share this at your school. The more the merrier. The more representation we have at events like this, the greater impact we can have in the world when it comes to sharing our skills forward, teaching young people to code, and also doing it in a way that is welcoming and open for people who might think that coding or computer science is not for them.
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is like a really, really important initiative, and it's something that ties into a lot of things that I'm really passionate about. And actually, on that note, I mean, the sort of work that you're doing, I think, is the kind of stuff, I mean, I can really just tell from the way that you talk about it, is something that you're personally very, inspired to do, something that you feel like is genuinely important. And I can understand why, like, for example, from my perspective, it's all about, if we're empowering the next generation of technologists with technical skills, then they're going to go and become the problem solvers of the next generation, right? They're going to be, creating and building the technology that solves problems that we face as humans. And so I want to know a little bit more actually about what is it that inspires you to do all of this work, right? Like, why exactly are you so passionate about it in the first place? What is that driving reason for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's something that's deeply personal to me. And I'm okay talking about it now for about 5 years after, what I'm about to tell you happened. I didn't know how to talk about it with anyone. I didn't know how to put it into words. And so I just didn't, because I just didn't know how. And I've I think let me just tell the story. For those of you who are not used to hearing emotional stories on, tech talks like this, sit down, hold on, because we're going to. So get your, I don't know, tissues ready, if you will. About 13 years ago, 14 years ago, actually, my children became victims. My children and I actually became victims of parental kidnapping. My children are safe and they're healthy and they're normal adjusted kids, but I actually never got them back. So if you think about some of those movies that we see, maybe some cheesy Lifetime movie, about the mom and she goes to get her kid and da 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 da, that was my life. That is my life. And that particular story is not my life, but I have the feeling that one day, this could in fact become a movie. So I tried to figure out, what should I do? How do I handle it? My children now live in a country sandwiched in between Algeria and Libya. They live in Tunisia, so North Africa. And again, they're safe and they're healthy and they're normal adjusted kids. I know where they are. I'm still in contact with them. And before COVID, I spent a lot of time there. I would spend my summers there. I taught myself how to speak Arabic, their dialect of Arabic, because I knew I needed to be self-sufficient when I went. And it took me a few years before I got there for the first time. I showed up. I showed up at their mother's house, and I went to go visit my kids. Mm-hmm. And it was scary. It was hard. Somebody kidnaps your kids and you go to their house, not your country, and, then the revolution happened. For those of you who may not be familiar with Tunisia, it's the spark of the Arab Spring, the Jasmine Revolution, which is what kicked off, several years ago, a lot of the, unrest and toppling of dictators across the region, including the Ben Ali regime in Tunisia, as well as what happened in Egypt. Mm-hmm. And so, obviously I couldn't go during the revolution. I was supposed to go. I had a ticket, and then the revolution was happening, so I had to cancel. But one day my daughter said to me, and I was working at Microsoft at the time, and she said, Mommy, I'm learning Microsoft. That's her accent. I'm like, what do you mean you're learning Microsoft? I didn't know what that meant, which you were probably like, what does that mean? Microsoft has so many products. Like, what the heck? She could be playing Minecraft. She could be, doing something with Office 365. She could be learning about cloud computing, like so many different OneNote, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I realized she was learning Word in her classroom, and her classroom had one device, and they were learning about, Word and Excel and PowerPoint. And, she would go up to type on the computer, because they had like an old clunky laptop with a projector at the front, and I know that many schools, still experience this today, whether you live in the developed or developing world. And so I thought, I may not have been able to get my kids back based on the legalities and bureaucracy and red tape of that, particular, bureaucracy there. But I thought, I can get some computers for that classroom. That's something that I can do. Mm-hmm. And that is what inspired my hackathon project at Microsoft. So everything kind of comes full circle, right? I set out to get computers for this classroom. And at that time, I talked to one of our senior executives, and she used some colorful words. So I'm not going to say exactly what she said, but she said, Melissa, you work at Microsoft. We have millions of devices. Let's go figure out how do we get some devices into this classroom. Mm-hmm. We ended up creating a program and a project that sent 400 laptops to 20 schools across the country. It was a collaboration between HP and Microsoft. Mm-hmm. And then I recognized early on that there was no definition of what it meant to be digitally literate, and that digital literacy meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And how do I make sure that digital literacy was being taught in these schools so that these devices could be used to make meaningful use of the internet to drive outcomes, whether that's education outcomes, economic outcomes, healthcare outcomes, agricultural outcomes, socioeconomic outcomes, political outcomes, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I started this thing where I had, HP gave me another set of laptops, and I had like 12 24 extra ones, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my friends jumped in a car, a bunch of engineers from Tunisia, and we decided we were going to spend the summer. My boss gave me 3 weeks off from work. She's like, don't count it toward vacation. Go make some videos. Go have a good time. Don't worry about work. So I took 3 weeks off, and we traveled around the country for 3 weeks teaching young kids to code. And we did that through Hour of Code, so through code.org. Granted, these kids didn't come out of it, knowing how to build a mobile application or becoming the next Bill Gates or whatever. But what we did is we demystified computer science for them and explained what computer science was through game playing and through blocks. And sometimes we would show up at these towns and like the mayor was there, there'd be a banner, one time the National Guard showed up. That was weird. But we realized we were onto something. And so we started a company after coming back, realizing that this wasn't just a summer trip, this was a company. So I now am also the CEO and founder of Mentor Nations, which is a youth-led digital inclusion movement where we've taught tens of thousands of young people to code in 12 countries. And we have a co-working space, a robotics lab, and an IoT lab in Tunisia. That was my hobby until, kind of thinking about my role at IBM after I'd left Microsoft and been here for a while. I've been doing a lot of digital skill building camps and shared some ideas with our executives. And they liked my ideas. And so now I'm working on both entrepreneur and student experience, bringing in a lot of my, personal passions. My daughter is now studying computer science, and she told me she won't build me a website. I don't know if she knows how to fix a printer. No, I'm just kidding. But no, she's studying computer science, and my son is studying business, and my youngest, she likes fashion and singing, so we'll see what's going to happen with that. Sorry, fashion and dancing. So we'll see what's going to happen with with that. But yeah, it was really my daughter not having access to tech is what inspired me to do what I do. And then I told my story for the first time on the stage of a United Nations conference a few years ago, a global conference called the Internet Governance Forum. And I had ministers in the room, and I was asked a question, and I was on the stage with a bunch of ministers. And I thought, instead of talking about my work in impact investment relating to internet and energy access, I'm going to talk about what inspired me to do the work that I do. And I did. And from there, a lot of people started asking me to come out and talk about my story and share, why the internet matters to me. And for me, the internet matters and digital skills matter because it's my gateway to being a mother. I don't have the traditional mother-daughter, mother-son relationship. My access to my children is WhatsApp, it's FaceTime, it's Facebook, it's Instagram, where we're all very actively connected. And after seeing my connection to the internet, my connection to digital skills, I thought, not everybody is going to be a digital mother in the way that I am, but having access to the internet and having digital skills, whether you're an engineer or just keeping yourself safe online and protecting your digital footprint, everyone needs to have these skills to be prepared for the future of work and play.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, first of all, thank you for sharing this story. I mean, I feel like, as I mentioned, right, work is so much more meaningful and when you actually have that sort of inspiration to want to do that work, right? That makes you sort of passionate, sort of drives you to do that work. And I'm sure that, first of all, I really hope, and I'm sure that everyone on the live stream does as well, that soon, after this whole sort of COVID thing dies down, you're able to, finally meet and spend some time with your kids again. I'm sure that'll be fun. You can, get your daughter started with more computer science and stuff. And when it comes to
kid, when he saw we have an event coming up in Tunisia called Iji Kodi, or Asia Kodi, which means come here and code in Tunisian. And we have about 1,000 people registered for the event across the country. We're collaborating with the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Higher Education, a lot of large organizations. And my son said, "Mom, can amateurs apply for this?" Like, yes. He goes, "Mom, I'm an amateur." I'm like, "That's okay. Come to the event." Yes, it's okay. I want to share one thing that you mentioned that we haven't talked about yet, and I think we're probably coming close to time, but I wanted to just share real quick that we have a really exciting event coming up that has not been announced yet.
Yes.
Where we're collaborating with, for those of you who might be familiar with Bollywood choreographers or Bollywood dancers, you can look him up. His name is Terrence Lewis. And we are going to be collaborating with him on an event that we're still working on the name. I think it's going to be Human Code. And it is going to be all about bringing arts and computer science together. Because again, one of the things that I said earlier was that I think that if computer science was taught more like an art, as we write music or, choreograph a dance, I think that computer science would be more accessible to new and unique and different audiences and bring greater diversity in thought, in gender, in ethnicity, and whatever to the table. It's happening January 9th. You will not find it anywhere yet. I will be launching it this week. So if you want to hear about the event, you can follow me on Twitter at Mentor Africa with a K. I'm not sure where else we're going to post it, but if you want to hear about it, you better go there because you might miss it. January 9th. We will dance and code. We will sing and code. We will write a code poem, perhaps your first code poem. So come learn with us, come create with us, and come change the world with us.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Melissa. I mean, all I can say right now, is first of all, this is a really exciting event. I can't wait to see what happens. You'll also be hearing about it, everyone on the live stream, on my social media too, so make sure you do stay tuned. There's some really fun stuff coming up around art and code and their intersection.
And Tanmay might be joining us. Okay, he is.
Yep, it's going to be really fun. Now
he's going to be one of our speakers.
Yeah, it's going to be super, super exciting. Like I cannot wait to show, everyone finally what I've been working on for a long time now when it comes to, machine learning, technology, and art, but it's almost there. So stay tuned for that, January 9th. You'll be hearing more details soon. So yeah, that's a really exciting event, and I personally can't wait. And it's so inspiring to me to see, not only the initiatives that you're working on, which themselves are so important, right? Like introducing technology to students, getting them empowered, introducing it to, and actually enabling different entrepreneurs and startups to work, making sure that they're diverse, right? And also being able to see the sort of backstory behind that as to why you got started and how this all sort of kicked off. It's really inspiring to see all of this.
And guess who's calling me?
Who is it?
My Amazon order. Don't you love it when you're on a live stream and Amazon calls you to say your order's downstairs? I'm going to put you on mute.
No worries. All right, you go ahead and take that call. But yeah, we've heard a lot of really interesting stuff from Melissa, everybody, all the way from, her backstory, why she's working on this technology, what exactly it is that she's doing. Now, there are a couple of other questions I see from the live stream chat that I will go ahead and ask. Of course, if you do have more, make sure you send them in now because we are getting, close to time, and I want to make sure that I get all of your questions. I do have a couple of questions from Shiva, for example. Question from Vasav, and this is from LinkedIn, so I will go ahead and take that in a moment, right as Melissa's back. And yeah, there's some really fun questions that we're going to get to cover the answers to. In the meanwhile, I will put all those links that I promised in the description between, IBM Z and the new events that we're working on. And yeah, Melissa, are you back? Oh, you're muted.
Okay, how is this? Is this good now?
Yep.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. I knew that they were going to end up calling, right in the middle of things. Awesome. So I've got to go get my Amazon delivery order because I'm out of milk and they've got milk for me downstairs and I want to make sure that they don't leave me. With that, thank you very much, Tanmay, for having me. I appreciate it. I will see you at the Ideathon. I will see you at Human Code. I will see you on Twitter. Again, Mentor Africa with a K.
I will put the contact links in the description. Quick thing before you go, Melissa, before you go get your milk from Amazon. Quick question.
Yes.
Is there a closing message that you want to share with the audience?
Yes, I would say, come learn with us, come create with us, come change the world with us, come Z with us.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Melissa. Super meaningful. Really great hearing all the stuff you have to share. Again, all the links will be in the description. If there are any questions that we couldn't get to answer today, I'll go ahead and put those in the comments from whoever it came from on the live stream, and I'll try and get Melissa to actually, answer and reply to them on the YouTube chat. So we'll go ahead and tag you, and hopefully we can get your answers there.
That sounds really good. I'm happy to engage, online and make sure that I answer all of the questions that came to me. So don't be stressed if you ask some questions. Tanmay, if you could make sure they get to me, I will get you answers to all of them. So don't fret, you will get answers. Thank you, everyone.
Wonderful. Of course. Thank you very much, Melissa. It was great having you on the show. And
thank
goodbye.
you. Bye. Talk to you later.
Talk to you later. All right. So once again, though, thank you very much, everybody, for joining today's live stream. I do hope you enjoyed that. Now, of course, Tech Life Skills is held every Sunday in the morning, 11 a.m. Eastern Time. So make sure you join us next week. We're going to be covering some really interesting technology. I can't tell you what it is just yet, but we're going to be covering, the sort of where human psychology and technology and natural language processing and a lot of other things meet. And it has to do with Wikipedia. So do get ready for next week, Sunday. Make sure you join us. And thank you very much for joining me today. Again, any questions, feel free to put them in the comments down below the replay, and we'll go ahead and make sure Melissa gets back to you. So thank you very much for joining, and goodbye, everybody.